Webinar will begin momentarily. Please stand by. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, State of Finance 2026, Expert Perspectives on What's Changing and Why. My name is Mark Brousseau, President of Brousseau & Associates. I'm pleased to be your moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is brought to you by OnPhase. I have just a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially get started. To ensure call quality, everyone's voice lines have been muted today. We encourage you to ask questions throughout today's webinar. To do so, simply use the Q&A tool on your screen to submit your questions to me. We'll answer your questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. And finally, an on-demand recording of today's webinar will be made available to all of you within the next few business days. We encourage you to share it with your peers and your coworkers. We all know that things are changing fast in the finance space. We have new ways of working, new risks, new expectations, and new technologies. Making sense of it all, well, it can be downright overwhelming. Well, to help you understand where we are today and where things are going and how you should prepare, we've put together an all-star panel of industry thought leaders to share with you their observations and their advice for how it is that you can best address those changes in the finance space. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Brendan Minkowski, Financial Crimes Unit Consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, Marla Bennett, Manager of Accounts Payable for Ortho, Illinois, Ganita Bindra, Vice President of Paymode Business Development at Bottomline, and John Title, Senior Vice President of Product and Engineering for OnPhase. You'll be hearing from all of our panelists in just one moment. But before we dive into our panel discussion, we wanted to give John a few moments to tell you a little bit about the sponsor of today's webinar, OnPhase. Hey, John, how are you?
I'm great, Mark. Thank you. Excellent intro, and super happy to be here with the panelists today. At OnPhase, our mission is pretty simple but powerful. We want to help organizations reclaim their most valuable resource, which is time. And of course, velocity over time equals scale. So our goal is to help organizations scale without headcount, be able to maintain control, and bring together fragmented systems. We've done this for the last 25 years with some of the biggest companies in the world, and we're excited to continue to work with those that we have the opportunity to work with. Today, finance and operations runs on a variety of different systems, and we understand that security is key. Velocity without security is deadly. We're lucky to have Brendan with us today to give us more insights. At OnPhase, we understand that we're your partner in both security and compliance. And then what we see in the marketplace and really in organizations that we work with, documents are the core of every organization, both finance and operations. But these documents are often in different systems or spread across different providers. That kind of environment we run into all the time. OnPhase brings the entire life cycle together. That's really kind of our thesis. Is that as we bring together capture, automate, and pay into one platform, then we can make a seamless access to both data, automate those transactions, and help companies achieve more scale and reclaim more time. So thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much, John. You can learn more about OnPhase at onphase.com. So, John, let's start with you. What do you believe is the most significant change occurring in finance today?
I think that what we're seeing in finance is really an understanding that visibility trumps kind of process and systems. They're seeing that, hey, what I can't see, I can't fix. What often seems like maybe a process or a system problem, we only discover late in the cycle, right? A missed invoice, a late payment, an unhappy supplier. And really, when it boils down to it, it's because we didn't have visibility early in the chain. We couldn't find the problem. If we can't find it, we can't fix it. Sure, there's the need to upgrade Both processes and systems are necessary, but those are often just emotion based on either diligence or capital. Visibility drives kind of all of that.
Yeah, one of the most common words I hear when it comes to finance these days is transformation, John. And it seems like we're talking about transforming our operations, our payments, the way we do our business. What's driving that push toward transformation?
Just two little letters, right? AI. I'm glad I'm first, right? I get to say it first. Everyone's going to say it, I promise. Uh,
5 minutes into the webinar,
I
let
know
me
I
know.
waited. I held as long as I could. But the reality is that the capabilities of AI are real. They're amazing, occasionally terrifying, but they're real. Um, and because of that, CFOs, CEOs, controllers all have expectations that are set really high. Um, and their shifting expectations lead to the finance and operations teams, they expect them to be less reactive, more proactive, better prediction, and again, do more with less.
Brendan, how much of this shift, this transformation, if you will, is being driven by rising fraud and compliance pressures?
Thanks, Mark, and happy to be here with everyone. And I don't want to always come at the inverse of John, but as a financial crime consultant, that's AI, and John got to say it first. It's changing everything with fraud, and it's making the fraudsters faster, more sophisticated, and they're especially around payment systems because they're able to personalize it and go faster. And we'll get into this later, I think, but in even impersonate you at scale. Um, at the same time, regulators have increasing expectations to be using the right systems, the right documentation, the right governance. What AI is not going to replace is accountability. So that's always going to be on humans, I hope, for the long term. And it only makes sense. So the humans need to put the systems in place, test the systems, and continuously update them.
Marla, as an AP leader, what pressures are you feeling in this transformation discussion?
Sure. And AI is definitely big talk at my workplace as well. How can we use that to make ourselves more efficient? And also, what processes do we do that we're kind of doing manually that can we have an AI, function to help, we can write a script and help that, automate those things for us, save some time in our day. Same thing as well. We are also concerned about AI being used for the bad. We see a lot of emails that come through, fraudulent emails, things like that, where vendors are being spoofed, and trying to take advantage of us, changing banking information and things like that as well. So, we want to be on top of the new technology, but also I firmly believe that AI is great, but you need to have the people behind it, making it do the great things for us.
Marla, are you feeling that the ex what your CFO expects from you as an AP leader has changed over the past several years? And if so, how?
Our business keeps growing, which we're all excited to be, with a company that wants to grow
Mhm.
and achieve more. But we do feel some pressure from time to time. Like you said, can we do more with technology instead of adding people? Let's look at our process first. What can we do to make ourselves more efficient? Make our systems work better. The systems we're on right now. What can we do to improve those? Can the workflows be changed up a bit? Make things more efficient. So we do. We have a lot of conversations about that in a positive way. Really encouraging conversations from the top down, thinking about how to make things more efficient, more lean, that type of thing. So that's a driver right now for us for sure.
Very good. Let's talk about suppliers who are often forgotten in many of these transformation discussions. How are their expectations and payment demands influencing what it is that AP departments are doing from a transformation perspective?
Great question, Mark. And as you said, I think suppliers now are expecting the same benefits we've traditionally offered to the buyers.
Mhm.
And I'd say, why not? I think that's a fair expectation. So what we're seeing is they are expecting automation. They are expecting speed of payment. They're expecting more payment certainty and visibility, which you alluded to. But above all, Mark, what I'm seeing is they are expecting choice of how they want to be paid. And these expectations are now accelerating adoption for RTP we see in the market, virtual card, premium ACH, and we're seeing supplier-friendly payment networks like Paymode or even other card networks offering flexible payment options or rates. And then above all, I'd still go back to, offering those integrated workflows that create speed, certainty, and visibility on both sides. I think those are some shifts that we're seeing. Um, I realize I did not use the word AI, so I will use it. I do want to call out that while AI is transformational and we see it in our everyday lives now, I will say AI will not replace the domain knowledge of our experts. So I think everybody on the call should feel confident in the value we all bring to the table because I don't think that AI can replace the domain expertise that you carry over the years of experience.
So, Ganina, when you think about all these changes we're discussing in the accounts payable space, by and large, do you find that AP teams are ahead of the curve, or maybe they're struggling to keep up with it all?
In the seat that I sit in, Mark, I'm seeing that AP is pretty transformational. I'm seeing a lot of automation in place. I'm seeing all of those top of mind items such as fraud risk are being served in the market. I do think the pressure is now on the supplier, which is what we're trying to see and resolve for and bring suppliers that same level of automation, visibility, and speed that I just referenced.
All right, so how about it, John? Where do you think that AP departments are doing well in terms of addressing all these changes we're talking about, and where do you think that they might have some work to do in keeping up with it all?
Again, I think that we see each organization's at a different kind of state in their journey. Um, and I think that we've talked about that before, right? You got to get started, you're going to make some changes, you're going to advance, you're going to learn a few things, that kind of thing. I think it's pretty natural. We see a pretty strong capability in the capture side, right? Can I OCR a document? Can I capture invoices? That kind of thing. And that's usually where folks start. And I think from an industry perspective, it's improving for sure with AI again, but generally it's a pretty strong capability in the marketplace, and customers have adopted that pretty widely. I think that when we're getting further down the pipeline into purchase order matching, customers are really leaning into purchasing heavily, right? They recognize the benefits of pre-approving spend. Well, that's great and it's good. I then create a slight problem later in my flow. And so that's probably the next level is like, how do I take advantage of that operational change so that my finance stream is also more seamless?
Yeah, Marla, what would you say has been your biggest challenge in keeping up with all the changes that you face as an AP leader these days?
I think we just, it's part of it is time, honestly. You're kind of buried in your day-to-day work and you want to make time to, review new things, look into what's hot on the market. So we really just have to almost like force ourselves to take a step back and say, I'm just gonna make some time each month and look and see what am I missing out on? We feel we're doing a pretty good job of using technology, but we know there's more out there, and it's just attending webinars like this, even just learning from other people as well, reading blogs, that type of thing. So that's one of our challenges, and it's honestly it's just kind of forcing yourself to make a little compartment of your time during the week and learn something new. And we encourage that within our department. We monthly meeting that we have, we all do a knowledge share. We take turns doing that every month, and it's really encouraged to educate ourselves, and we're always looking for what's the hot item out there, what's being talked about, and what is really helping other businesses. So, trying to learn from, other, folks that we work with, or even our suppliers and whatnot, what kind of systems they use too. So it's really just making the time to figure out what's going on, what's new, what's changing, how can it help us?
Brendan, from a security compliance perspective, is there anything that concerns you about the way that many AP departments are going about keeping up with these changes or maybe addressing these changes we're talking about?
Yeah, it would be at the bottom, at the top, changing too fast and not changing correctly, not having the right people in the seats, or the inverse at the bottom, not changing fast enough, maybe changing the wrong way, being stubborn and looking at past results and thinking that because that worked in the past, maybe due to an audit, that you're still safe and not evolving correctly. And that's the key. It's always going to be balancing the two.
What
Um,
would be your single biggest piece of advice then, Brendan, to our attendees today who are listening to all these transformational ideas? What would be your advice for them ensuring that they go about things in a secure way?
do your homework. Just because it works for one institution doesn't mean it's going to work for yours. It may. Get outside research, maybe even a consultant. I'm not trying to plug myself, but just make sure that you don't make decisions too quickly or don't make them too slowly. And just always double check. I'm sure there's probably a lot of accountants on the call. Always QC, double QC, peer review. Make sure it's the right decision for your institution because everyone's built different, whether it's AP, um, or anyone else in the finance industry.
You know, John, this is really fascinating because Marla talked about the importance of carving out time to be able to develop these strategies. And John says, well, you got to have the Goldilocks principle here, right? You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to go too slow. This is really a balancing act for AP leaders like Marla, no?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you've got to keep the lights on, right? At the end of the day.
Hmm.
Um, at the same time, the water's rising. So pick your poison, right? You do have to balance out where you spend your the precious time that you have. It's helpful to have supportive leadership. If you're just drowning and you're trying to, bail out the ship at the same time, it's really hard. And so I think knowing what to take to leadership to say, hey, we need to address these things in a smart way and need your support, then you have an opportunity really to go out, see what's in the market, evaluate what's going to work for you, find your pain points, and start applying solutions.
You know, Ganita, when Brendan was talking about, the need to go at the right speed, it was interesting. It harkened back to your comments about the push toward real-time payments, right? Payments are moving faster than ever these days. And that in and of itself creates some risks, which I'm sure Brendan will talk about later. That what advice would you give to our attendees today to make sure that as they move toward these faster payment solutions, that they have some controls in place? What should they be looking for in a solution to ensure they're not introducing some unnecessary exposure?
Yeah, Mark, my 2 cents would be when you're looking at a solution, look at their history, look at how much volume they process, look at their experience, look at their investment in securing a platform or especially your payment volume that's going to go through their system. Look at all the, credits that you require to actually run and move money in the US. And above all, I think you want to look for a provider where fraud is a fundamental, I think, thing that they offer when it comes to their competency.
Mhm.
So I think those are some things I will advise our listeners. I will also ask them how do they manage bank account validation for their suppliers if they're in AP or if they're in AR when they're giving out their bank details to their customers. How is that protected? So I think
Mhm.
those are some things, that's where it starts. And that's what I encourage our audience to look at when they're looking for a provider or who manages their money, even if
All
it's
right. Let's find out what our audience is thinking about some of these topics. Let's dive into our first poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. We want to know which factor is driving change in your finance department the most? Which factor is driving change in your finance department the most? I see Marla leaning forward. You can't respond, Marla. You could only comment. Is it
Looking like
leadership? Is it leadership pressure? Is it fraud and compliance? Is it supplier demands? Is it technology adoption? Or is it something else? take a moment to respond to this poll question, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. All right, Marla. So if you were allowed to respond to this poll question,
They look a little
uh,
closer.
how would you have, what's the biggest factor driving change in your AP department?
I would pick fraud and compliance. I think that's just so at the top of our list of things we worry about these days, honestly, just with the fraudsters that are trying to take advantage of us, honestly, and they do a really nice job of looking like a vendor, looking like somebody that should get paid. We really need to be all, senses on highest alert, honestly. We don't want to be sending money out the door that to places it shouldn't go. So that's where I would land on this poll personally.
Does it keep your boss up at night too, Marla? I mean, is senior management concerned about it?
For
I
sure.
think I could already tell the answer.
Oh, for sure. It keeps us all up. We tell you top to bottom. So, but we feel we have good processes in place right now. But
Mhm.
we need to evolve hopefully faster than the fraudsters do. That's what we're always trying to do, get a step ahead of them.
Is indeed the challenge. Let's see how our attendees responded to our poll question. We asked you all which factor is driving change in your finance department the most. 40% of you identified, well, the boss, pressure from leadership. Another 40% of you said technology adoption, and 10% of you said supplier demands. Another 10% of you said something else. Hopefully, you'll drop that in the chat and tell us what it is. John, leadership pressure, what is it that you're hearing CFOs say they expect from AP that's different these days compared to just a few years ago?
Well, I think that what we're seeing is CFOs that as companies grow, there's a natural desire to not grow or, the finance team, the AP department, whatever it is. And so what they're asking is really for the organization to do more with less. And I actually, in this poll, I think that we might be seeing a little overlap between leadership pressure and technology adoption. I think leaders are looking at the headlines going, hey, we need to adopt some technology in order to accomplish the scale that we're looking for. I think that that's really becoming the drumbeat of CEOs and CFOs is, hey, technology is going to help us out. It's going to save us. It's been that way probably for 30 years. It's only getting louder.
All right, so let's do the level set, John. Let's talk about why it is that organizations want to deploy technologies such as AI. From your vantage point, what is it that's breaking first inside finance operations today? Is it processes? Is it systems? Is it visibility? Is it all of the above?
Well, and that's what I mentioned at the onset is that, it's easy to blame the system or the process. It's easy to walk into an organization and say, hey, I see paper or your ERP is old or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, those processes and systems really kind of surface as a lack of visibility. You don't know what's happening on someone's desk in a piece of paper, right? You don't know what's happening at a remote office, a branch, or whatever. And what that means is that you can't make good business decisions. You can't decide whether or not I should pay that invoice or not based on budget or based on prior art or whatever. And so that I think what we see is that while it feels like a system or a process might be broken, what's really, really happening is that you've got this kind of black box of AP that, you know, that's really causing some grief to the organization, especially as you scale, because it only gets worse. What works great, and we can talk about this later as we get further into this, but what works great for a small business just breaks quick, right? When you get bigger, you have more volume, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Brendan, I want to put a pin in that one. I mean, when processes start to strain, right? When we start to see them break or bend, where do risk and fraud vulnerabilities start to appear?
Um, with exceptions and what I like to call behavioral drift. So, to John's point, someone someone stepping on a line, leaving documents around, or granting exceptions outside the normal process that gives an opportunity, and that's a buzzword in the fraud world. There's something called the fraud triangle. It's very old school, but it hasn't changed. It's opportunity, rationalization, and pressure. And opportunity is the one that presents itself when weak controls are in place. Simple as that. If there's no opportunity, there's no way to break in and commit fraud. So you need callback and verification procedures with AP. Approvals can't move outside the normal systems. But it is the tone from the top, not just with compliance, but if someone's granted an exception um, for a vendor master change, and it's just, maybe that one was fine, but the next one isn't. And that type of opportunity is when you're really gonna get into trouble.
Ganita, as Marlo was implying earlier, payment processes tend to amplify the types of breakdowns that John and Brendan are talking about here. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so Mark, in my opinion, payment processes amplify these breakdown when they are disconnected from the upstream workflows. Like when is the invoice due? When is the PO due? Like when it's totally disconnected and different artifacts are living in different systems, there is going to be a breakdown. So I think in my view, when you bring it all together, you eliminate those breakdowns and bring in more efficiency and visibility.
So, Marla, I know this whole discussion about inefficient processes or broken processes certainly must resonate with you. After all, your organization's recently automated. Uh, Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what was going on before you automated and some of those headaches that you were experiencing that told you it was time that you had to do something different.
Sure. Like I said, we've been growing and our old process was a very familiar process. There's invoices coming from the mail, maybe email from vendors. And we initially were routing those out in our office envelopes back in the day.
Oh
And then
my
we
gosh.
graduated, we graduated to,
There was somebody to collect them? Wait, there was somebody sitting
yeah,
at a desk to actually receive them? Wow, that's
you bet.
impressive.
They get their pen out, they'd write their initials on it and
Oh
call
no.
it
No hand stamps, I hope.
that. No, uh-uh.
Okay, that's good.
I know. Then they'd come back to us for entry, and that's great when you're smaller. And it's 15 years ago, but times evolve, and it's not good workflow process. It's not efficient. So when we took the leap into automation, and you can't imagine how you lived life before that. Just even on the end of we have an audit maybe, or we're looking to get some information for the bank. How can I collect these invoices instead of, going through file cabinets? They're all in one place, look them up by your vendor, and then you can just easily email them out. We've got file cabinets with nothing to do anymore. They used to have tons of invoices and check stubs and whatnot, and we don't have that. So we've got space for rent in our file cabinets. It's been a great change. And it's been great for all of our approvers as well. They have, speaking of visibility, they have the visibility. Do they want to look up old invoices? You bet. They can just go into the system. They don't need to call us, email us, can you send me these copies? It's at their fingertips as well. And that's been a real win on that side too. It's not always easy to convince people to, have another kind of to do with a working system, but it's been well received, which is really makes us happy too. We enjoy partnering with our approvers as well. So it's been a good move.
What's been the benefit that surprised you the most from automation, Marla?
I would say just maybe feeling good about not having your desk covered with invoices. It was just you get rid of the paperwork, get rid of the clutter. Honestly, it kind of like helps you feel better about just your own space, your own work, and knowing that it's organized and you're not losing things anymore. Even nobody's losing things on purpose, but if it's not in our system, it's because an email didn't come from a vendor, or maybe their email address was blocked. It's not, you kind of lifted that weight off your shoulders of, the mountains of paperwork around. The efficiency win, just it's a feel good, honestly. You've got a good system in place and you can service your approvers faster too, when needed.
John, for many organizations, it might not be as obvious as at Ortho, Illinois, right? Where they're growing fast and needing to support that higher volume. What are some signs that an AP leader should look for in their operations that it's probably time to re-engineer the way they go about doing things?
I think to Marla's point, the first thing is your desk covered in paper. That's usually a bad sign, is that because it means it's not going somewhere, right? If it's on someone's desk or working. The challenge that organizations have is when things are manual, it's tough to understand the scope and the kind of the stats around how things are working and are they best practice, right? Does it take me 5 days to approve an invoice or 30 days to approve an invoice, right? Does
Yeah.
do I, from the time of receipt to capture in the ERP, is that a day or is it a week? And the problem is that early on, those stats are hard to get, right? You're talking about a time study or you're looking at some kind of analysis or something. Um, Unfortunately, at the start of most people's journey, the first indicators are the lagging ones, the late payments, the unhappy suppliers, the credit hold, right? Those are the lagging indicators. Um, to be proactive, you look at the process early, but it can be really hard if you've got zero automation in play.
All right, that brings us to our next poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. This time we want to know, where do you see the biggest strain or risk in your finance operations? Where do you see the biggest strain or risk in your finance operations? Is it your processes? Is it your systems? Is it a lack of visibility? Or is it something else? Take a moment to respond to the poll question, now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Ganita, when you're talking to finance leaders, where do they typically tell you they're feeling the most strain in their operations?
I would say processes. Maybe I think processes and systems both, if I'm being transparent with you. I think processes are built to evolve, and I think all leaders are looking to evolve their current processes. And I think same goes with the system. What works, I think Brendan or John, you pointed out, what works when you're SMB doesn't work when you're mid-market and an enterprise business. So it's a constant evolution of those two things, in my opinion.
All right, let's see how our attendees responded to our poll question. We asked you, where do you see the biggest strain or risk in your finance operations? Well, look at that, Ganita. You have your thumb firmly on the pulse of our attendees. 42% of our attendees identified processes, another 42% identified systems, and 17% of you identified visibility. Risk really does underlie a lot of the conversation today, Brendan. I'm curious about fraud and risk these days. After all, it's always been a part of AP and finance. What's different these days? What is it that's evolving the fastest when it comes to fraud and risk that our attendees need to be mindful of?
Yeah, great question. It's definitely one of the oldest and more most historical forms of financial fraud or corporate fraud, um, in terms of vendor and accounting manipulation. Um, Usually they had to be an inside man, whether they're involved or not, or just getting lazy. But the fastest evolving, and going back to AI, is certainly impersonation and being able to create invoices at mass scale, but also like deep fake voice fraud. Excuse me. Mentioned that at the beginning. Um, like a personal note, like if you get a call, you don't know who it is, don't pick it up and keep talking. I've heard some recent reports that AI, if you just say a combination of about 30 words, they're able to impersonate your voice, which is scary, but that's just the current state of affairs. What else? The Marlo had mentioned the business email correspondence or compromise. And they're doing it at scale and they're doing it in mass. So they, even if only 5% are successful, it doesn't matter. They're reaching the right inboxes, they're impersonating the right invoices, they know the signatures. It's really sophisticated. So if you're not on your A game, you may just approve it and not even think twice. Um, Kanita mentioned the real-time payment. That can be exploited very easily if you're just approving a payment and it's in real time or even automated, and then that could be redirected. Like redirection's a big fast evolving theme in this realm, in this financial space for AP. Um, was the other second question, like what's still underestimated? Second
Yeah.
part of that question? Okay. Yeah, I think I touched at the beginning, the vendor manipulation. I think that's one of the oldest. So don't underestimate it because everything else is growing so quickly. Let's just focus all our staff on AI and these highly targeted campaigns. So let's keep our traditional sort of controls in place. And the third party ecosystem as well. That's one of the oldest ones, but it should not be overlooked. But the biggest shift is, credibility. Like these fraud attempts, like people just they're becoming harder to distinguish what's legitimate and what's not. So you got to have the top people, including executives, the top tools, and just don't get lazy. It's only going to get worse. I hate to say it like that, but it's not going to get any easier. Um, so
Marla, you've been at this for a while. You're a seasoned finance leader. From your perspective, what's changed about fraud? Is what Brendan's saying resonate with you? How do you feel it on a day-to-day basis about the way that fraud has changed over the past several years?
Oh, definitely. They're getting smarter. They're using better tools, to try to mimic things. We just even today, very timely. I saw a news story before I even logged on and heard one of our vendors was compromised, had a cyber attack. And so the first thought is, have we heard from him the last couple of days? Has anybody tried to send some new banking information through? Luckily we hadn't, and we have processes in place where we don't just answer an email and say, "You bet I'll change your bank information," because that is an easy thing to get tricked by. They make their emails sound so legitimate. You know, they they mimic our CEO, even some of our physicians. So they're looking to mimic leaders in different companies to maybe grab you at a compromised time for yourself. You're could be a deadline day and you're rushing through your work, so you always need to make sure you take a pause and don't react to an email. Take a look and make sure you have a process in place, not just answering an email. You pick up that phone and make a phone call and see if that's legit or not. We still have to go through those kind of old school things, to make sure things are accurate. And we rely on our IT department as well. They do a great job of even blocking emails from coming through, but things still do get through. So you have to be vigilant, excuse me. And like I said, AI is great, but there has to be a person, just like the others have said, that's doing the thinking behind it too, for sure.
Yeah. John, there's no question that the fraudsters are becoming more sophisticated and they have better tools at their disposal. But unfortunately, a lot of AP departments are leaving themselves vulnerable because of the manual and semi-automated processes on which we rely. And Marla really hit on the key one, of course, manual bank account validations, or maybe no bank account validations. Talk to me about, from your perspective, where you see manual processes introducing the greatest risks in an AP department.
Yeah, I mean, as both Kanita and Marla have said, is that um, it's not so much the manual process, it's the volume, right? I think Brandon's right that at the end of the day, humans aren't the weak link. They're actually really much better at finding some of these things and recognizing these things if they have the time, right? When volume increases and you've got deadlines, that kind of stuff, then it does open the gap for bad actors and for mistakes to be made. Um, and again, a busy AP manager might not notice a duplicate invoice or, might rush through an approval when they shouldn't, that kind of thing. And there's also the whole other aspect that, while not outright fraud, manual processes allow sloppy business practices. Maybe I hold on to that invoice for, through month end so that my, month end looks better at my branch or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
so it's the impact to manual plus volume is really, I think, where we see, companies getting into some trouble.
Yeah. We know, Ganita, that one of the ways we can mitigate our risk is when it comes to actually initiating a payment to a supplier. The way we pay a supplier can help reduce our risks. talk to me about that and what are some controls we should be looking for in a payment solution to help ensure that we're protecting our financial assets?
Yes, Mark. So one of the things, John, I know you mentioned that people can do the work, manual work, as long as it's less, right? It depends on the time. But I'd say sometimes as human, and I think I put myself in that shoe, and I think that sometimes emotion comes over us. Like if a vendor
Yeah.
is saying that I want to be paid today and I'm not gonna send you the goods until you pay me, maybe I will change that bank account. And but that's where technology comes into play. And I think that's where these platforms that we're offering have the intelligence built into the process and they're not emotional. Things like built-in validation, bank account verification, fraud detection tools, already integrated payment platforms with other secure systems and getting data from them. And that ongoing threat detection is why these platforms are a must have. And I think transparently in this area will do better than human or legacy processes.
Yeah. So, John, we started off this webinar with all of you talking about AI, and it's no question that AI is sucking all the air out of the room, right? It is the topic of the day in many cases. Um, let's bring it down to ground level, though. Where do you see AI delivering real value today, and where is there some hype?
Um, that's a good question. You know, the reality is that the headlines are real. The hype is like the models are improving. They're getting more intelligent. They're becoming more skillful. That's absolutely true. But systematizing that, changing that into something that's helpful, in a finance or operations process, those are kind of different motions. So the challenge is that the hype, while real, is hard to implement. And so I think that, at the end of the day, we really want to make sure that we're employing AI in areas that bring value. We try really hard at OnPhase not to just use AI as a shiny thing, right? In the marketing brochure, we want it to actually create some value, to have some real impact to our customers. And that takes a little bit of time. It creates a little bit of, disconnect between expectations and delivery. But at the end of the day, that's the best way to do it, is to decide, okay, this is how we're going to implement these capabilities in a way that are useful. So definitely there is a disconnect between hype. Not that the hype's fake, because it's real, but systematizing it is a totally different motion that I think folks have to kind of understand. Um,
Brendan, from a risk standpoint, how do you see AI strengthening control and compliance and audit defensibility moving forward?
It strengthens several areas. I would say consistency, certainly evidence, um, visibility, but you can't assume that all of these things are it it still needs a human level of review. I know we're kind of beating this up, but it's true. Like AI's, it's good, but if you just implement it and let it run, it leads to issues, of course. It does reduce manual, and it should continue to reduce like spreadsheet reliance. Working at a big four, trust me, everything needs to be on a spreadsheet, and so I'm hoping that continues to be the case. It should reduce email approvals. It should centralize workflow, right? And that's, I think, what's going to happen and enhance our jobs and hopefully not replace them.
All right,
So when automation, like the controls, it should be moved into a continuous monitoring. I mentioned this before, and I think others have, and use that to continuously monitor and update versus having a control or a process and looking at it every year during an audit.
let's talk for a little bit about those humans
Yeah.
that Brendan just brought up. It's been said to me by more than one AP leader that technology is the easy part. It's the humans that are the hard part. Marla, you've recently automated. Talk to me about how you went about managing change in your staff and whether you encountered any resistance from your staff and how you overcame it.
Sure. I think, and it's a good point where people hear technology and we're going to automate some things. And your first thought is, am I going to lose my job? And it's real. And we would, who doesn't think like that? It's human nature.
Sure.
And, fortunately, if you're putting the system in place, hopefully part of that reason is not to just catch up on where you are, but to anticipate where you're going to be. So we looked at it more like we are putting the automation in process now, um, training all of our approvers in that system, but we're certainly not looking to cut any staff. In fact, we like to think that we can work on some other things. We can start doing maybe some analysis, things that we wouldn't maybe have the time for. Take your job to a next level. Instead of just typing in numbers all day, you actually get to do a little work behind it. Like, what do those numbers mean? So that's what's exciting about that. Whenever you can, streamline some things, it opens up some time for you to do some other processes that you might not have had time to do or pay attention to. So that's been a big gain. So we definitely make sure that everybody knows nobody's being replaced. We want to keep you around. But can we make things better going forward where we don't need to add another person, as we grow? And that's what we've found, that we've been able to maintain staff level, but, increasing our volume, through our company.
Marla, is there a key lesson you learned as it pertains to change management that you'd share after your
Sure.
automation journey?
I would say, we learned this actually from a conference we attended many years ago, is get all your stakeholders together before you are announcing this change. If you make people feel involved from the get-go, they're more apt to be on board with it. They can understand the reasons behind it. If you just throw a new system at somebody and say, hey, we're going to change this right now and you need to comply, it doesn't really make a good partnership. So we've really learned that, just finance is kind of its own little beast. And, you're in the back office doing your work and you kind of forget that the people that are going to do the other side of it have emotions too. And it's new for them. So we really have looked at that, other things we've implemented, not just, this one system, but other things as well. We always think about, let's work with them. Let's see, their thoughts on it too. And just give them a heads up as to what we're looking at and why. If you let people know the background, it makes them feel part of things as well, and they understand the reason behind it and what the win at the end will be for everybody.
John, it's clear that Marla's had tremendous success in managing change with automation. Let's take the other side of the coin. What do you find is the most common reason that automation initiatives fail or get stuck or don't get the adoption that Marla was able to achieve?
I think that Marla just gave you the playbook for being successful. If you don't do those things, then you risk getting stalled or failing, right? Change management is the hardest part. Configuring a system, turning it on, that kind of stuff is pretty straightforward. Um, you know, it's underappreciated how much tribal knowledge is in an organization, right? How much people have learned over the years. It's just in their brain. They know it. And so what happens invariably is that as you go into a production environment, you start processing real transactions. Life is messy. You start to find those edge corner cases, right? And that's usually what causes people to stall. And they freak out. And they say, oh no, we didn't design a system or a process to handle this. The world's going to end. And if you've done your due diligence, you've brought your folks in, you've set up specific goals and metrics, you can use those to evaluate these obvious and unavoidable speed bumps in the journey. You're going to say, hey, how big is this? Is this a molehill or a mountain? Okay, great. You can measure that against your objectives and then press forward. If you don't do that, then everything feels like you do or die, and it's real easy to get stuck.
Yeah. Gadeen, it's not just internal stakeholders we need to be worried about when it comes to the success of our automation initiatives. We also be mindful of supplier adoption too. They could go a long way to determining whether our initiatives are successful. Talk to me about some strategies for driving supplier adoption of electronic payments and where organizations tend to go off the rails.
Yeah, Mark, I think that's where we started. You asked me, what's important to suppliers, and I think it's time we give them all the
Mhm.
things they desire to, right? From automation, the payment certainty I talked about. Are we letting them know that a customer is going to pay them in the next 24 hours? Are we letting them know how the customer is going to pay them? Are they going to pay them in the way that the buyer or the customer wants to, or in the way that they truly want to be paid? I think those are some things. The adoption happens when both buyers and suppliers come together and achieve similar success when it comes to automation, visibility, and monetization, which is a big factor too in all of this. So I think so supplier adoption is, in my view, one of the biggest drivers for payment success.
All right, let's go to our last poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. This time, I want to know which skill will be most critical for finance teams in the next 5 years? Which skill do you believe will be most critical for finance teams in the next 5 years? Do you believe it'll be technology proficiency? Do you believe it'll be risk management? Do you believe it'll be strategic planning? Do you believe it'll be data analytics? Or do you think it's going to be something else? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. All right, John, so I'm going to put you on the spot. What capabilities will finance teams need, in your opinion, to succeed in the next 5 years?
I actually don't see my option on the poll, so I'd have
Well,
to
you have to
put it
put
in
it
the
in the chat.
chat.
You have to put it in the chat then, John.
We've mentioned it a few times. AI literacy. It's an AI literacy is actually not a tech proficiency. That's the part that's interesting. Ganita mentioned it earlier that the value that you've gained over the years in your experience is actually a superpower now. It may feel at times like the AI train has left the station and you're standing there and like, oh my goodness. Read an article the other day that folks over 50 actually have a leg up because they know how to put together a plan. They understand the context. They know the business, right? They can put together an environment, a system, a process that's going to work. And the same is true for the AP folks. Their experience is actually a huge benefit because AI has lowered the barrier to entry. I don't know how to program in Python. Me and my friend Claude have written a lot of Python programs, to make things happen, to automate my workflow. And so I think that literacy is going to be really important. It both helps people to automate their own personal workflows, right, in their job, but it also helps them spot some fakes and understand some of the risks that Brendan's brought up that are really real. That literacy is twofold, and I think that's probably the most important skill as we go forward.
All right, let's see how our attendees responded to our poll question. We asked you, which skill do you believe will be most critical for finance teams in the next 5 years? 36% of you identified technology proficiency. 27% of you said data analytics. 18%, you're worried about risk management. 9% said strategic planning, and 9% said something else. Maybe John got a chance to type that into the chat after all. Marla, when you look into your crystal ball, how do you believe the role of AP is going to change over the next 5 years? What are you expecting will happen in the way you go about your job and maybe the people who work for you go about their jobs?
I think, like we've been talking, just finding ways to use the new technology that's coming to make things even more efficient and also use it, to stop problems that could come our way, stop fraudsters trying to, get into our systems or, get payments from us that they shouldn't be getting. I think we just have to be more vigilant. That's really a good point about, the difference in ages and I think it's a thought process too. So I think even having to bring, the new generations coming up, um, that have been in front of a computer or a tablet their whole life, that just because you see it, it's not real. You can't believe everything. That's an old school finance mindset, but between technology and, using your thought process, just making sure that you're always vigilant. And, I see that technology just evolving AP even more, from where it's going.
Nita, what will business to business payments look like in 5 years from now?
That's a deep question, Mark. It can go an hour, but I think In
You
a
have two
nutshell,
minutes.
when we look at B2B payments, and I think payments truly thrive on scale and standardization, and I hope and think that there will be more of that. I think one payment network cannot do it all. I think we will see a lot of network partnerships, one network partnering with the other to streamline payments for our suppliers and buyers. And what that would mean for CFOs and AP managers is faster payment settlement, faster payments, less errors, less fraud. So I'm hoping that it's no longer a conversation of, check conversion, but it's how do we how do we do automation at scale?
Brendan, what risks will define the next 5 years for finance leaders?
Yeah, to sort of echo what everyone said is um, not evolving, but also just keeping your core people looking at the right things, in the fraud risk, the technology implementation risk, and updating and could constant sort of continuous monitoring, and all of those converging, like if they're not intersecting at the right times and continuously, um, it opens up all sorts of risks. So it should get easier, if all those if and when, but it's a big if. The social engineering, the manipulation of the documents, that's only going to get smarter, as we've said. So if you have all these controls that are being updated, you have the right people in play. I think you can reduce your risk, but the risk is never going away.
John, what's one action you think our attendees should take to prepare for the future of finance?
Wow, just one, huh?
Just one.
I think that there isn't a silver bullet for for every organization. I think it really depends on your size, where you are in your journey. I do think, though, that you should focus on where you feel like your organization is and will be as it grows, and plan appropriately. I think oftentimes they get caught flat-footed, right? You start to see some of these bad outcomes, and then you try to adjust, and you're behind the eight ball. So a little bit of pre-planning goes a long way. So I think having finance lead the charge as far as, hey, where are we at process-wise? What technology do we have in play? What is coming? Where can we improve? That would be the thing that I would suggest, is that, hey, let's be more proactive in adopting some of these technologies and processes and automation so that we can scale, so that when the time comes, we're ready to go.
Marlo, what's one thing you think AP leaders should do to prepare for the future of finance? And maybe it's something you're planning to do yourself.
I think just keep yourself educated, keep on the edge of what's the new technology. I think those two things right there are really important. And, there's many things to learn, and, work with your peers too, connect with others and other industries, other businesses, and, see what's working for them, and what kind of pitfalls they've had too. So I think just network, educate, and stay on top of the upcoming technology.
Nita, same question to you. What's one thing you think our attendees should do to prepare for the future of finance?
I think all of the things that everyone has said, but I think one thing we all can do is just review what you're doing today and ask yourself, can you do it better?
Great
Mhm.
response. Brendan,
That's tough to beat.
that is hard.
Uh,
She's tough.
yeah, I'd probably be repeating, but yeah, educate and just stay. Every day you should learn something new, and just keep your technology up, keep your people. Um, Again, all these things have been said. Um, and just be yourself too. Don't get too caught up on it. That's the only thing I could probably add. Um, it helps you keep your head.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from technology to risks to process improvement. If you want to learn more about the types of topics we discussed today, there's a free guide that OnPhase is making available to all of you. I understand it's pretty well written. Just scan the QR code on your screen, download that free resource. It'll help you prepare for the types of topics we talked about today. We don't have time for questions, but we do have time to let you know who the winner of our giveaway is. Today, somebody's getting a Yeti cooler. I mean, we did
Nice.
all the heavy lifting here. I mean, should we? Now I digress. The winner of our Yeti cooler is Kevin Foley. Well, congratulations, Kevin. You're a double winner. You got to get some great insights from this awesome panel, and you're getting a Yeti cooler sent to you. The OnPhase team will reach out to you soon to verify the shipping details. Well, that's all the time we have for today's webinar. Ganita, John, Marla, Brendan, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. On behalf of our panel and OnPhase, this is Mark Brousseau. Thank you, everyone. Hope to speak with you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.